Hey, I'm Sander van Doorn and welcome to my studio. We're actually here today to record my last studio session, which is part 4. The studio session is kind of started out as a quick tour throughout the studio about a year ago. And with that, I actually started producing a few parts for actually producing a whole track. And it kind of grew from there. So we did part 1 where I talked a little bit about the drums and bass lines. Part 2, I spoke a little bit more about melody, and we done a few things there as well. And in part 3, I spoke a little bit more about compression. And today is going to be the last part where I'm going to ask a few questions to which people have sent in to me. And I'm going to tell a little bit more about a possible contest we're going to do as well. I started out with a kick, and the kick I've used was this one. Which is a kick I've made myself in the past. It has a pretty nice attack to the short end with not so much of a long tail, but it has enough force to interact with the bass line I've made as well. So I've used this kick by layering kicks from Vengeance sample CDs, which I kind of topped on each other. And together with compression and limiting, I kind of created this kick. So again, this is the kick I've made. For the bass line, I chose actually a rather simple soft synth within Logic called the Klopfgeist, which is kind of like a percussion sounding synth, which works really well for rolling bass lines. So this is actually the bass line I've made, which is quite thick in the underlayer. And on top of that, I've used plugins also from Logic called the Bass Amp, which kind of gives it a more bass guitar kind of feel to it. And on top of that, I put a distortion on that as well. And well, the result was, let's see, was this bass line. And together with the kick, it kind of created a nice flow. So with that, with doing the bass line, let's go to the Matrix Sheen. I kind of put in like 3 blocks before every single kick to create a kind of groove. I've used quantize to give a more like a swing to it. So for instance, take this part. Without quantize, it would have sounded like this, like quite straight on. And with the quantize, I've used to the 24th note, and it's now actually doing something different. So it creates a more swing to it. So that's what I've explained with regards to the bass line. I've used a clap as well, which is a rather standard click. I actually also use from the Vengeance minimal CD. And I've used quite a straight close hi-hat on top of that. The first one was a synth I've used for, actually that's this one. It's a synth I've used from the Predator, which is a soft synth by Rob Pape. It got quite a nice percussion sound to it as well. It sometimes needs a little bit of extra tweaking with additional plugins, for instance a distortion or a nice reverb to it, which usually can be done with using standard synths and effects from Logic there as well. I'm actually working on Logic 8 today. So this was a very simple, straightforward melody I made with the Predator. I can show you the Predator as well. This is the Predator. It's called the Lead Jump Torque, which I kind of tweaked there as well. And as I said, it's got a nice percussion sound to it. And on top of that, I've used a N-verb, which is kind of like a short tail reverb. I've used compression to take the verb out a little bit more. So this was the result. Let's see. So in total, with every part attached to that. So it sounds quite straightforward, but the Predator is a really nice tool to make like simple additional sounds to it. And on top of that, I've actually played in a melody. Let's see, which is this one. Okay. Which is a synth I used from the Omnisphere. This is the Omnisphere, which is a synth from Spectrasonics. It's actually their newest synth, which is a synth that combines ARPs, bass lines, atmospheric sounds, and the actual capability of tweaking with synth functions as well. I've used that to create a quite warm synth. I played a melody with that, which you just heard, and on top of that, I've actually used a compression, the docking as I explained before, which I've used using a side chain channel with a muted kick, and without the compression on it, it would sound like this. So I've used ducking with a compression. I've used for that a standard compression within Logic, where I actually sidechained, in this case track 1, which is an audio track with a muted kick in it. And now it uses the compression of that kick on top of the synth without the kick playing itself, which creates this effect. Kind of like up and down. Taking this part, which has already has a pretty good dynamic to it, but you can add a lot more in this case by let's see, inserting a limiter, and limiter actually reduces gain where there's too much and adds gain where there's a little bit more needed. And with that combination can make your track sound a little bit louder in volume. So this is we're using a little bit of limiting. This is without. This is with it. So it adds a lot of volume to a track. So this is kind of the basic uses of a limiter, and actually the basic uses of everything I do to build a track myself. So yeah, obviously I've done all the parts, but that doesn't make for a track. Now you have to actually make a project. What I usually do is simply start with a kick, add rhythm to it. So for instance, in this case I would say, I've built this kick, so I'm going to put it over here. Going to start the project now. So we've got a kick. So I'm going to copy even more kicks. So I'm going to add a kick. In this case, obviously, it's a little bit too flat. So for instance, what we could do is already add the bass line to it. But we don't want the bass line to play in full force already. So in this case, I would use a, let's see, I would use a single band low cut, for instance. Which means you can hear a little bit of the bass line, the top layer, the top frequency, but still you don't have the full force from it. So you can build from there, for instance, by saying, the bass line is playing here together with the kick, and I'm going to add track automation to the project, in this case using the low cut, and actually build it from the 1000 Hertz to, for instance, 120 or 140 Hertz. So it kind of rules in now at this stage. and you can say, well, I'm gonna lower the volume of the kick from here. Like this, with full force bass line around that point. So let me add another part to that. So it needs to build to a certain point right now, and what you could do for that is actually use the drive from the distortion to create a kind of build up to it. So for instance, in this case, I'll use track automation to build it up, and perhaps even so this is kind of like a very simple way to build something up. Obviously, you can add a verb to it to create a special effect to that as well. You could also use effects, for instance, from Vengeance, the effects unit CD, which, let's see, I've got over here, Vengeance effects. For instance, well, actually, we'll use this one over here. I think that's a nice one. Okay, that's not the one I meant. Let's see. Now we're gonna use let's see, Vengeance House or Minimal. Actually, we're gonna use the effect sounds from that one. Has a really nice one. I think this one it is. In this case, you've got like a kind of like a windy effect to it. So now it's building and building. So obviously it stops now quite fast. So you can add for instance, delay to it. Let's see, in this case, a tape delay, which kind of makes the wind effect go on and on. So again, this is still very, very basic, so it really needs a lot of tweaking. Also, obviously, with the wind effect, I've used this quite aggressively. I personally would use it a little bit subtle by, for instance, using a low cut on the effect and actually let it build up throughout the track. And for instance, before the bass really starts kicking in, you can go down with the low verb, which basically is this effect. So now you've got a better introduction to go from one part to the other. So that's what you could choose for a build up. You could also actually build up using a tape delay, and a tape delay is a very nice tool, and it's a very simple tool. It's a delay which you can overdrive. So for instance, when you take a kick, you can say we're going to get this tape delay and we're going to put it, for instance, we're going to start at 55% feedback. And now the kick will keep on going on a tape delay, and you can also add more feedback to it. So now it keeps on building, and you can use the groove, for instance, to create speed with it. You can build it down, or you can build it up. And you can use different notes. You can choose a lot of synths for it. Obviously, I've got a lot of hardware synths here as well. Each one has a different purpose to it. Well, for the studio session part, I've used the Omnisphere, which you can build up, for instance, going to a breakdown by first using a low frequency synth. And let's see, for instance, this one. A very simple synth. Let's see. And you can add your synth layers on top of that. Let's say, for instance, in this case. So this is kind of, well, a way to work the break. Again, it's a basic way, but you can build it up from there. For instance, the tape delay, or and the very nice verb, for instance, is the Space Designer, where it has a very warm and very deep verb to it. For instance, when you would use that on the melody part. It keeps on going, and you can build it up from there by using a tape delay. Well, I can actually show it to you. For instance, in this case, this one, where I'm gonna use that on the melody. And then, with using track automation, you can make it go to a certain point. You can add drums to it. And, well, basically, you've got total freedom to do whatever you want. You can add a separate additional melody on it. You could also, obviously, use a less melodic break and work a little bit more with techie sounds. For instance, the Evolver is a really good example for that. It's this one over here. I've used this synth for the riff track I made. I used that for the lead sound, and also I'm working on a new track right now. And let's see, this is the sound. It's a very distorting sound to it. It has a very nice distortion function on it. It's a bit of a stubborn machine. It's partially digital, and the other part is analog. So you kind of combine different oscillator parts to create a nice synth, which makes it quite unique and also very stubborn, because analog sounds change constantly. And but it's really good for like really thick lead sounds. And for instance, the Nord lead I have here is absolutely brilliant for additional sounds. I've used a lot of the Nord lead sounds in actually all of my tracks. It's that lead that adds what's missing to, for instance, a lead from the Evolver. If there's still room in between, then the Nord lead would provide a nice sound to fill it up with. And this is the big Moog Voyager. It's kind of like the bassline machine. I think every producer has one by now, to be honest. It's a really thick analog synth with very standard sounding but very useful tones it generates, for instance, for bass lines. I don't know if I've got something here right now on a Moog. So actually, let's put this on local. So it's now, actually, this is the sound I've used for one of my Sander van Doorn intros for my sets. So it has a very, very thick sound to it. This is a very weird sound as well. Let's see. For instance, this. It's a pretty evolving sound. I personally would completely cut it back to a simple sound and make it do what I like to do with it. Obviously, there's a LFO going on it with a filter right now, but it starts from a really warm point and builds it up from there. So the Moog is a really nice synth to use for the more bassy kind of sounds. And obviously I've used the virus a lot. For instance, this sound right here is the sound I've used for the Grasshopper track. And the virus is a synth that is really useful to create sounds, but also to for instance, make it go feedback, for instance, with the release function. For instance, we've got, this is the sound, adding a bit of, let's see, adding release to it. It has a really nice flow to it, and if you put the release, it just keeps on going and going. So combined with effects from Logic, you can really build it up to a certain point, and you can instantly stop it as well. So the virus is actually still a synth that I use a lot. I think it's a brilliant synth. It is a digital synth, but it still sounds pretty warm and analog at the same time. Obviously, besides that is the Blofeld, which is a really nice synth as well, but it's not as thick as the virus, but it kind of has the same function in my studio as the Nordlead, which is to create more additional sounds. You've got very simple sounds to it, for instance, this detuner. It's one everybody would know, but it's always nice to have it, as well. And I think the Blofeld's really good for synths like that. And besides that, I basically, as I explained in the project, I used the Omnisphere, which I think is a brilliant synth and a very warm, with a very warm feel to it. I use the Predator a lot for the more percussion sounding sounds. And besides that, I kind of do most of my stuff with the standard Logic synths. It's all about using a simple sound and using plugins to make something out of it, and you can go completely crazy with it. So that's basically what I use to produce my tracks. We just talked a little bit about building a track. Obviously, when your track is finished, it's actually not finished yet, because you have to master it yourself. Well, everybody has his own little secret way to master a track. I actually use a lot of mastering tools within producing a project, which I know is quite unusable, because mastering is something you used to do after you produce the track. But I think that with mastering a track within producing the track, you can really control the limiters and tweak the compressors in order to make it sound as thick as it could possibly be. So, for instance, I would use the limiter already with producing the track, and within a track I could easily spot certain sounds conflicting with another sound. The limiter actually is a really good tool, because it shows that something is compressing too much. And within doing that with producing, you can easily change a sound, the particular individual sound where the problem lies. Well, if you would do it afterwards, then you have to find where the conflict actually is going on, and for me, would take too much time. So, for instance, I've used a pretty standard limiter on the output. That's actually what I do. I actually master the track within Logic, and I would do it with the output, the actual master. So we've added limiting to the track. As you could see here, what you could also do is, I've used a lot of plugins from Universal Audio. So this is the Cambridge, which is a very nice equalizer with a very warm sound to it. So basically, when I master a track, I use this equalizer in combination with the limiter to basically get the most out of the track by killing frequencies that are useless, and therefore creating more space to add different frequencies to the project where needed. So that's basically how I master my tracks.